Yo, 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 yo. What is going on, COD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder. And today is the day. At least, or so we thought, even though it most likely still will be the day once we get closer to reset, once we end up figuring out what the actual matchmaking is going to be. So yes, there's a lot going on. Let me touch on a couple things. There is madness ensuing right now, and it's really stemming from confusion. So if you looked at this end of season timeline here, we can see that the preview is on the 20th. We have matchmaking today at reset, right, in about 8 hours. We have the region select on the 31st. And then we have the new season / T1 season starting on the 1st of February. However, if we go and look at another end of season timeline for one of the 9 S2 plus KVK groups, which is SS2-2 through SS2-10, and just to quickly show that off, right, you can see this is SS2-3. But if I zoom out and we go here, you can see SS2-2 all the way to SS2-10. Those are the 9 Season 2 plus KVK groups for all of those kingdoms, those 79 kingdoms that are going into the new T1 season first. But if we look at this end of season timeline, we can see that everything lines up for matchmaking, the preview, the region select, but the new season start time has changed. So let's show you what this is. So after this, I saw this morning on the CoD Discord because this was being stated. I gotta scroll up here a little bit, but I think it was as early as around 8:30 or so, and I'm probably gonna have to go up a decent amount, so we might not do the whole thing. But players were sharing these, right? So you could see this, like Natsu, Cat, they shared these ones, right, initially, where people were talking about some of the changes that they were noticing between when the new seasons were going to start. So I then took it upon myself to go ahead and hop into each of the 9 Season 2 plus KVKs with my accounts, and I started pulling the data to figure out, where are we right now? And I think it's, where's my post? Here we go. Right, so here's the post. And you can see we now know that there's 3 groups out of the 9 that are slated to start February 1st. Thankfully, my main account is actually in the February 1st group, just in case if there's fog. Sure, very small win for me in that case when it comes to previewing with an account that has a level 25 scout camp. But again, you then have 6 groups, which is the majority of the kingdoms, that are starting February 4th. And you can see the kingdom numbers here that I listed these out for. And it is, I guess overall I just don't understand. That's the big thing for me, is that they make this change, but from my knowledge, there wasn't an announcement. I don't think there's any mails. However, we will check just to see, right? Maybe we missed something. So nothing here when it comes to feedback, simple mode, survey. I don't see anything, right? Even if we go over to my main account, right, in case you're like, okay, well, maybe boss, they don't message people that have low level accounts. I mean, they pretty much send us everything, but let's look. So I got the adjustments, I got Crucible, I got simple mode, Titans, nothing here about a change to the end of season timeline. And this really brings me back to what we thought were going to be, and we covered this during the most recent patch notes review that we did. If you remember, before that, in one of the dev Q&As or feedback columns, what was one of the things they stated? Along with, I think, an announcement on the CoD Discord about being transparent, about being forthcoming in changes or hot fixes, including more notes. Again, in the most recent patch, again, unless it's a delay and they're still improving or they're still waiting for confirmation from higher ups or something to say, yeah, we need to start putting in these finer details, even though they said that they would. That wasn't done in the last patch notes review. And if we look at what's happening now, again, this is just another example of yet another shadow change that is being made without any explanation. Now, some people may say, boss, this isn't that big of a thing. This is just changing the starting date by 3 days for a number of kingdoms in this pool. And yeah, that is one way of looking at it. However, for most of us that have been around, or I would say for anyone who's been around for a while, that this is just yet again another example of making those shadow changes without giving an explanation or a reasoning or a justification why it needs to change. Because from how I look at it, there's no need to change it. Why would they change it by 3 days? What reason is there? And this isn't to say that they have ill intentions or anything of that regard. This is to professionally constructive. This is to give a professional constructive form of criticism. Is that where is the reasoning? Where's the explanation behind the change? Because I don't see one. I don't see why the change needed to be made in the first place. I mean, if you think about it, really all you've done is kind of nerf and almost cause more negative ripples. Because number one, you had a pool of 79 kingdoms. The great thing about having a bigger pool of kingdoms is that you're able to diversify opponents and matchups because you have more kingdoms and more players to pull from. When you split those groups off and you have one group with 3 kingdoms, one pool with 3 KVK groups worth of kingdoms, and you have another pool with 6 KVK groups worth of kingdoms, now all you're doing is limiting the amount of, or the potential opponents and potential balance that those matchups could get. So it's kind of like 2 points in one. The second is that by extending the date out, right? What if alliances and players are struggling to speed up, to accelerate plans, their preparation, their organization, their structuring going into the new season because they know it's basically coming in a couple days. But now by extending it, you've given them a little bit more of a cushion window, right? Sure, that could maybe feel like relief. But on the other hand, it's a change that they weren't expecting to happen. And then you have to then think about, as point 3, what about the players who didn't see a change? Maybe some of them would like a relief. So you're just kind of opening this can of worms for no reason, right? And then I think the third, or I guess the fourth point here for me would be that with how you're going about the matchmaking and by splitting up the pools, now what this means is we already know, right? We now have a better idea on who's getting matched in what pools. Why? Because we can see that here off of which kingdoms are in which pools. So we kind of know now matchups that can happen and then matchups that cannot happen, right? Because by eliminating or by splitting the pools, you're now telling certain alliances, like for example, we know that a majority of people, I'll give you a good example, a majority of people we know have from TFS have gone to 23 from 30. 23 is not in the February 1st pool. Does that maybe give some of the kingdoms there some relief? Sure. Do maybe some of the alliances and kingdoms there some relief? Okay. But what about for some of the other alliances and kingdoms who maybe wanted that matchup, who maybe would have loved to go up against TFS and other alliances and kingdoms as well? But now they can't because the pool's been split. That can also cause a form of negative outlook. And again, it just does a disservice. It doesn't really do anything net positive for you. If anything, it's more of a net negative change. And these are things that, again, I don't mean to go back to the whole, this is like the things you can understand if you play the game more. And it's not to say that. What it is to say is that if you're not immersing yourself, and this is a better way to put it, if you're not immersing yourself in the inner workings of what happens in the day-to-day, from participating and engaging in other areas outside of just maybe day-to-day playing, you may not know these things and how these things can impact and affect players that are going into this upcoming season. Because I can tell you for one, sure, am I excited that at least the matchmaking hasn't changed, so we'll at least still be able to figure that out, and the data that I'm going to pull today is still going to be relevant? I'm happy with that. But it is rough to know that these last-minute changes that are happening and occurring are not being met with the same professional courtesy and extension to the community on its level of transparency to say, hey, this is the reason why. Because if they would have wrote a mail out to all the players that are getting pushed to the 4th and just gave an explanation for why, okay, to me that just doesn't seem as it's a difficult thing to do. I don't think we're asking for a lot at that point. I think that's a fair and a proper expectation for us to have. And I, for one, will always be here to bring light to these situations. Not, again, to shun or to slight the developers or the game itself, but to have a professional expectation on a standard that, one, and most importantly here, was promised to us, the community, by the developers, of saying, hey, we are going to start being more transparent. We're going to make announcements. And bear in mind, they still can. There is plenty of times to still do this, right? If it comes out in the next 24 hours. We'll see if it does. But if there's not a good enough reason for making the change, then just revert it back. Just bring the people from the fourth and put them back to the first. Like I said, I don't see anything wrong with this. Now, let's go down the rumor mill potentially for a moment, right? And Joey Chestnut posted something. And again, I haven't got anything confirmed. I'm actually still waiting as well to hear back because I had reached out to the CODCS and to some of our CC contacts in the creator program just to ask, right, and see, hey, can we get an answer here possibly? And I haven't heard back yet. But again, I just asked maybe about an hour or so before recording the video, or this video that we're doing right now. But Joey says, I heard TFS told devs to push back the start date so they could farm longer. Is that true? So, regardless of if someone asked or not, let's talk about really what the meat of this post is, which is that pushing the start date back so players and alliances can farm longer. That, to me, could actually make some sense. If you're factoring in that, like, for example, TFS and UPROAR did a truce a couple days ago, right? And the big reason for that was because they wanted to be able to farm and recover before going into the new season. However, it should also be stated that even if that happens, if we're talking about hospital recovery, depending on how many hospitals you have, being able to farm more resources, etc., you're still going to be given a window, right? That hasn't changed going into the new season. So even if, and this is why to me, it just doesn't make any sense at the moment, because you're going to be given a 2-day window of where you're not going to be able to attack anyone anyways. Right? Just like they started doing that in Season 2 and then had it in Season 2 Plus, and it's going to be there in T1 unless they've stated otherwise, which they haven't come out and let us know that there's going to be a change to that. So you're going to have that, you're going to have the shield, but then you're going to have the no PvP timer that is set to 2 days if it still will be the case. So even if you think about that, you're still being extended to basically the third to heal up your hospital and to farm resources. So what's 1 day really going to change if you think about the third to the fourth? And bear in mind, that's only if alliances are going to the same starting Zone 1 region. So let's factor that in now. Let's go down that path with your boy. What did we see happening in Season 2 Plus? And what did we see happening in Season 2? We saw that the majority of alliances, over 90% of alliances and kingdoms, opted to not fight in a starting Zone 1 region for a new season. Why? Well, because they didn't want to sit there and burn, having to then use a resurgence, waste a bunch of resources, burn through other resources and materials and troops that early into a season, right? And so, again, if you look at the trend, this is why it's important, right, to follow these things that are happening across the landscape of the game. It's very unlikely that we're going to see massive war happening in a starting Zone 1 region. It's more likely that we'll see war in the new T1 season in one of those adjacent Zone 1s, similar, those neutral adjacent Zone 1s, similar to what we saw in Season 1 Plus. So again, and it's more likely that the trend of alliances and kingdoms communicating with each other, once the groups are made, that they're going to go and have a conversation. Once we know who's going to get paired with who, they'll go and say, okay, hey, where are you guys starting? This has been a trend pretty much almost every season since the first matchmaking group started. Even if we go all the way back to Season 1 Plus, where we saw groups like TA and others, right? And oh gosh, now I'm losing train of thought, like GRZ, etc., and others during that time, where we saw people starting in different Zone 1 regions. And it was because they didn't want to sit there and have basically starting Zone 1 civil wars and fights that early. It just doesn't make a lot of sense if you're trying to have long-term sustainability to be able to fight throughout the season, along with being able to fight in the pinnacle or the crescendo of a season, which is the final zone. So again, if we're looking at logic, if we're looking at rationale, if we're looking at player psychology, if we're looking at trends for what has been happening season to season, it just all kind of points to why the change. Right? That's my question, is why the change? Because to me, and to potentially some others, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It doesn't mean that, again, we're blaming the devs. Nothing of that sort. But what we are doing is asking the question / questions that I believe as a community, we are deserving of hearing an answer for those things. And if there's not a good reasoning or not a good answer to that, then just don't make the change in the first place. And you know what? That is okay. But what I hope is not happening, and I'm just going to state this for the record, what I hope is not happening is that people are not going and making what I would consider to be impulsive suggestions to the dev team. And again, I'm just saying in general, right? Because I haven't seen anything that's been confirmed yet. Despite, again, that post that we just saw there on the Discord, is that I hope that's not being done. Because if it is being done, it's being done from a place that does not have all the information and does not have a complete understanding of how things have been playing out and are playing out, to justify making such a suggestion to them on pushing out the start date because we need to farm more or we need to heal more, as an example. Now, if there is ample evidence that can support the majority of players that are in favor of pushing out the date, I'd love to see that data. I would love to see that. Because to me, most of the groups right now are not fighting anymore. Sure, you might have some small skirmishes and some blitzkriegs here and there, if you will, that we've seen and I've been notified of. But the majority of those 9 Season 2 plus KVK groups are done fighting, and they're in heal and recovery mode. And it's been that way from anywhere from a number of days to potentially a few weeks now. And so, again, and I mean like a few, like a low few weeks, right? Not like a high, a high few weeks. And that's because, right, we saw the majority of fighting was pretty much over within 2 days, right? For the majority of those 9 Season 2 plus KVKs, right? With the exception of the New Wars and the TFSs, of the GGs and the TAs, the OGs, EIS, SKs, and Tribes or VVVs, right? Again, there are some of the groups that lasted a little bit longer. But the majority of them, and I would argue all of them at now, are in heal and recovery mode. It's just without a doubt, right? Regardless of small skirmishes and small little, pokes and prods here and there. And so, I don't mean to beat the dead horse, but I guess if anything, I hope people see where I'm coming from with this, and I hope it makes sense to those that are hearing this out. Which again is not me saying that them pushing the start date is a bad move. It's just that it doesn't make sense right now. That's really what I'm trying to get at. It just feels like there's not enough reasoning, there's not enough logic, there's not enough explanation or lack thereof to justify such a change, right? Yeah. So anyways, that's my long-winded soliloquy. However, if you share a different opinion than me, I'd love to hear. If you think that there's ample reason for them pushing the date or other, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear. And if you're in a KVK group right now, I would love to know, how long did the fighting last from what you saw in the final zone? Or how long have you been in a rest and recovery period, right? If you're already doing that, I'd love to know. Have you been doing it for a day? Have you been doing it for a couple days? Have you been there for a week or two where you've just been healing, you got all your hospital done, and now you're just trying to gather as many resources as you can to prep? Do you get the angle of me talking about how when you start a new season, there's probably not going to be a lot of war that happens in your starting zone 1, right? Doesn't mean that it can't happen. It's just unlikely if we're going off based on the percentages for what has happened from season to season thus far. Does that part make sense? Do you feel like, okay, I get that, I'll be able to heal a lot more? Let me know anything and everything in those comments down below. That's going to be it for me. Very last thing too as well. Remember, if you make it to the end of the video, we're going to be streaming today, 6:30 UTC, which is going to be, at least, again, that's going to be 30 minutes before reset today. So 23:30 for today on, what is this, the 29th? Yeah. That we're going to be streaming the matchmaking for when that's announced. I'm going to start pulling data after this video is uploaded, probably sometime after, and then we're going to show you all that off today. And then once matchmaking is released, I'll go into each of the groups, I'll plug the numbers in, and then we're going to show you guys off all the data so we can see what the matchups are going to be, who are the strongest, who's got the most T5s, all the good stuff, right? So that's going to be an event for this evening. Be there or be square. Now I'm finally done. As always, until next time, I will catch you later.